God bless everybody. Today it is September 21st of 2023. What I'm doing in this video is I'm converting the Julian dates on my paradigm to actual Hebrew dates. Now, I did a video on September 6th. I explained that I had found a very specific date in this video. You can go out and see it. It was on September 6th. That there was a very specific date in the timestamps that he had given us in the paradigm, and that was October 10th of 23. But it was a Gregorian calendar date, and I indicated that I wanted to change these to Hebrew calendars. And when I did that date of the 10th month of the 10th day of the specific leader, we would see it fall on December 22nd of 23. Which would be the Hebrew equivalent to the Gregorian calendar date that I gave you of October 10th of 23. So if you go into my paradigm, and if you've not seen past videos about this, you're going to probably be lost. It will only be the people that have followed the building of the paradigm through the last few years that will understand how this all goes together and why I've modified these dates from Gregorian to Hebrew calendar dates, because I believe that it was required to make sense and make it more accurate, and I believe that it has. And one of the reasons this occurred was that if you go into my page, my free website, and we sell nothing but information on this site, so there's no reason for you to get concerned. If you don't believe me and the information I'm giving you, please comment and ask questions so I can understand what I'm not explaining properly, or I'm just doing the best I can with the analysis that I'm presenting, and I'm giving you the findings. That's all I'm doing here. It could or not, it might or might not happen. Based on my research, this is what I found, and so I'm going to present that, and you can determine as we move forward in the next few months if this is really happening or not. So I have an eschatology page at End of Day Survival, endofdaysurvival.com. When you come down, you're going to see these PDF files. This is that chart that I just showed you. You click on that, it brings up this chart, okay? And when you click on the other chart, that brings up this paradigm that I built, which I did on September 6th. But I had made a comment when I had done that when you go to this timeline and you actually look at it, that I only had one very specific date that I could verify based on the Gregorian calendar and the Hebrew equivalency. And I don't have a lot of Jewish friends, so I had to sit down and actually understand how the Jewish calendars work with the Gregorian calendars and how they're built so that we can understand how to convert these numbers properly. Now, in the last video, I explained something extremely important. You probably maybe not quite understood what I was trying to do. I had not figured out all the Hebrew calendar conversions yet. I knew one, and I knew it was a 73-day gap between the time of October 10th of 23 to December 22nd of 23, based on the Hebrew calendars, and it's an easy one to Google and find that there's a 73-day gap, and so I added 73 days to the additional dates. But I realized something as I went into this study that doesn't work, but it didn't really change the chart, and I want to show you how that works. So I had one date I knew for sure, and in the old calendar it was here, and that was the 10th month of the 10th year of 23. I indicated based on the king in the paradigm of the modern day 3 kings, based on the past 3 kings and the length and times they've been in office from past to future. There's 3 kings of the past that reflect exactly the times that these kings are in place today, and the times that they were there, and the length of time that they were there, and they work in tandem in conjunction with each other, so they don't there's no problem when one king's been in there 4 years and this king's been in there 11 years and this king's been in there 23 years. It all works together, and I've shown you how that all works out. So the kings, I'm pretty sure, are right. And those 3 kings are Isaac Herzog, which would be Jehoiakim, Reuben Revlin, which would be Zedekiah, and Erdogan, which would be Nebuchadnezzar. And if you Google those names in like Bible Gateway, you're going to bring up all these scriptures that give you these very specific dates, like of this year, of this month, of this king, or actually, let me say that different, of this month, of this day, of this king. And then you could equate that amount of years that he's been in position to a date of today, because he was in the same position in the past. And when you take these 3 kings and place them together, they work in conjunction. So there's no fudging the numbers. And you can see that if you've followed my paradigms. So I knew that this date was October 10th of 23. So we're going to do a real quick review on how this works, and then I'm going to take it to the next level of this, and I'm going to show you exactly how this all goes together. Okay, I'm going to blow this up just a little so you can see it. So on December, this was originally the 10th month of the 10th year of the 9th year of a specific king. In this case, we're talking about Reuben Revlin, because he was elected in 2014. His term ended in 2021. He's still not necessarily, he's a sitting president, but he's an ex-president. He's alive, and so he's in the country. And when something happens to Isaac Herzog on this very specific date, Reuben Revlin has to step in and take over before Antichrist puts in a governor. And actually something happens to Reuben Revlin later in the paradigm, about 18 months later. And so Antichrist would put in this governor, and you're going to sort of see that as we work through this information. But so I had one date that I knew for sure. It was December 22nd of 23. So at the time, I didn't realize that October 10th of 23 would actually fall on the 10th of Tebet, and that was a very tragic day in the history of the Jews, and so it was easy to find this very specific date. So when you look at those steps, they have verses attached, because each of the prophets were saying exactly the same thing, and they gave you a date stamp. So in this case, in the 10th month, came Nebuchadnezzar into Jerusalem, and he besieged Jerusalem on that very day. Okay, so that's the 9th year of Zedekiah. Reuben Revlin came in 2014. His 9th year would be 2023. So I knew this was the 10th month of 23 based on the paradigm of past and modern day kings, and that if you go to other verses, that since multiple prophets were talking about this, we could find additional information on, let's say, a day or other information that would give us complete date. So if you look at it's Jeremiah 52:4 instead of 39:1, as we just looked at, it fills in the holes. And so in the 10th month of the 10th day of this month, 9th year of this king, we would see Nebuchadnezzar the Babylonian come and start to siege Jerusalem and build forts and things around it. And so I equated that to a Gregorian calendar, or in the Gregorian calendar dates of today at the time, that was October 10th of 23, since Reuben Revlin came in 2014. His 9th year would be in 2023. So I thought it was sort of interesting that the 10th of Tebet, if you convert it from Gregorian calendar dates to Hebrew calendar dates, would fall on December 22nd of 23. And so that made me wonder, because it had happened on this very specific date and time, that we would potentially see another siege, I thought, on October 10th of 23. And then once I realized, somebody had asked me, and I told them I was going to do this, but I hadn't got to it yet, if I converted them to Hebrew dates, and I actually could figure out how to do that, which is extremely hard because it's built off of a unique system, that we might actually see a better mapping of this and better timestamps because I don't think it's a Gregorian thing. I think it's actually a Hebrew thing, and that Daniel and these prophets would have known the Hebrew calendars, and they would have told us based on the Hebrew dates when they were on the ground. And so what I had to do is I had to break down these Gregorian calendar dates into Hebrew, and that is a really interesting thing. It took me a while to figure out exactly how they were doing this, and I only had this very specific date of October 10th of 23 converted to December 22nd of 23 to work off of. And how did they arrive at that number? So this is not an easy process, and there is a process to determine what a Gregorian calendar date to a Hebrew calendar date is, and they change every year based on the months that they come in, because each year starts on the beginning of the Feast of Trumpets and then radiates forward throughout that year. And these calendar dates usually have like 29 or 30 day dates, and where we have 30 or 31 or maybe 29 or 28 in February. These are totally different dates, and they work off a totally different system. So I had to break a lot of things down to make this work. First thing I need to understand is what the Jewish months were and how they usually fall. And that's what I mean. They don't fall constantly on the same dates. They fall within months, but they fall within a specific day of a month of a year. And so we need to look at that. So the first thing I did was I broke down the Jewish calendar dates with the first month for each year. So you can see that based on 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27, because I go to the Feast of Trumpets of 27. The Strong Generation ends on May 14th of 28, so we need to look at the Fall Feast of 27, and I believe that's when that rapture event occurs on the Feast of Trumpets during that 2-day event of October 2nd and 3rd of 27. And you may disagree with that, and that's fine. That's just my opinion based on my research. So when you change these calendar dates from Gregorian to Hebrew, you have to adjust them based on the first day of the month of that year, and then add dates to it, or days to it, because we have a number of days, like in this case 10 days, that have to be added to this month. Okay, so this is how this works. So we're going to use this date first because this is the one that I knew worked. I knew that October 10th of 23 somehow got me to December 22nd of 23, but how did that happen? So if you go to the first day, or the start of the month of Tevet in 23, that you would have to determine the very first month of that year, of that month that he's talking about. So in this case, the 10th month, or the 10th month in the Jewish calendar, would end up being in December. Okay, because it starts in the Feast of Trumpets, which usually starts in September, October. So in this case, it started on December 12th of 2023, and then we add 10 days forward based on that verse, and you end up on December 22nd. So I knew this is how they were doing it. You have to go to the first of the month and then add the dates to it, but you have to figure out based on the month of that king what the month is. In this case it's Tevet, and then once you figure out the first date of that month, then you could add the additional days, and that would then give you December 22nd. So that's a good example of how that works, and that's how I knew that if I adjusted all the other dates, they would come out proper. And it took me a while to figure that out. So I had removed a couple people. Well, actually I hadn't removed them. I just really wasn't sure what to do with them. I talked about in Daniel 10, we had Daniel having a vision after he was sick for 3 weeks. And it's really interesting because it indicated that on the first month, or the 24th day of the first month, that John had a vision that he had been sick for 3 weeks prior. And then Michael comes to him and tells him that he's been warring against Iran for 3 weeks, 21 days, And then he goes and says he's going to go against Persia or Iran, and Michael will actually lead this attack. Which is really interesting that Michael's been brought into this picture to create this war on this enemy called Iran, or in the history called Persia. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. So in the 24th month of the first, or 24th day of the first month, what would that fall on? So I had to go out and I had to figure out, I'm not going to do all these, I just want to show you a few of them. So I had to go out and figure out what is January 24th of 23. So this tells you that the very first day of the Jewish holiday New Year, or the New Year of the Jewish calendar, is on September 15th of 23. And so, okay, that's really interesting. So what happens if we add 24 days to that? And when you do add 24 days from September 15th to 23, you add 24 days. It comes up with October 9th to 23, which is really interesting, at least in my world, because I believe that on October 9th in 2019 was when the White Horseman was released, and we saw that invasion by Turkey into Syria where they set that 30-mile buffer zone up, and we actually saw an invasion of Erdogan on, of all days, my birthday. Now, I indicate it's Operation Claw Sword because that's what it turned into. They've been doing this for a number of years. It's not the first invasion they've done, but I know that this was right before COVID broke out in the end of year of 2019 into 2020. And so I equated that if you looked at the White Horseman coming out in October of that year, we saw COVID come out right after that, and we started to work into that first of the year where it became a pandemic. In 2019, on this very specific date of October 9th, as you can see, we had a military operation begin with the Turkish Air Force launching airstrikes on border towns, set up these 30-mile buffer zones along this northern border. So it was a specific date, and I thought that was really unique that that happened on my birthday. But now I'm getting a date of January 24th of 23, and I've shown you where I showed you where I found that because in verse 4 of Daniel 10, it tells you in the first month of the 24th day that we would have an event happen, which is basically Michael comes and Daniel has a vision of Michael basically going against Iran as you move through here, and it clearly states as he moves through here that in verse 20 as you go forward, that he has fought against him for 21 days, and now he is going to go against the prince of Grecia, or against the prince of Persia. And then that's really interesting because not only is he going to take out Persia, but then the king of Greece or Turkey will come. And so we're going to see possibly an attack by Iran on, or by Israel on Iran, which would then bring Turkey into position. And in that process, we will watch Angel Michael go forth with Israel probably in that attack. But it doesn't turn out well because he tells you clearly that Grecia or Turkey will come in after that. So Israel does not accomplish this goal. And with them being attacked by multiple fronts and different things, and they're talking about potentially 2,000 rockets being launched in from different sides, so maybe up to 5,000 or 6,000 rockets a day, depending on where they're launching them, that Israel's going to be able to knock all these down and still take care of Iran's facilities to where they aren't a threat to this country. So if you take the 24th day of the first month of 23, you figure that out, it's September 23, you add 24 days, that's October 9th, that tells you the Jewish calendar date that it includes, so you can follow that also. This is actually Tishri. I'm sorry, I spelled that wrong. I did actually adjust it already. I didn't notice it was in the video. And what's really interesting, so when I subtracted 21 days, because he's distraught for 21 days before he has this vision of Michael that goes forth against Persia. If you subtract 21 days from this date, it equals September 18th of 2023. And if you've noticed in any of my videos, that's my mother's birthday, September 18th of 2023. I'm not making this stuff up. I didn't know any of this, and I don't know if it reflects anything or not with my family. When they signed the treaty, it's my father's birthday. So, I don't know if we're blessed or cursed. It just seems that it tends to fall on a lot of our birthdays in this family. And I've talked about how I believe that this comes through my grandmother Boldemeyer, that she was the one that, brought me up and got me into religion to begin with. And at 5, we were in a brimfire type church that would literally melt down, brimstone, melt the walls down type thing when I was young. And then we ended up going into a different church, and then I left at 13. And so I've been on my own path since, but just realize that for some reason we keep coming up with these October 9th dates, and I don't know. So I have a speculation here, and this is totally speculation. If we have this besieging of Jerusalem by the 22nd of this year, based on the 10th of Tevet and how that's affected the Jews in the past, and the Babylonians were actually the ones that besieged it in the past, and it will be the Babylonian this time, or Turkey, which sieges them in the future, that these are two interesting dates. And why I say that is because this date just happened 2 days ago, 3 days ago, and this date's coming up. And the question is, on this date, I had done a story on my YouTube channel on December 18th that was 2 days, 2-3 days ago, that Erdogan was going to leave the EU, and that he was going to leave NATO, and he was going to do an invasion. So we have this potential starting of an invasion by Erdogan literally threatening to leave the EU, and that he would then, once that happened, he's going to go against the Kurds, because that's his whole goal. You look at Sweden, all this stuff that's going on, it's all about the Kurds, and this is why he's parting with NATO, because he doesn't think that they are treating them as a terrorist organization. So my speculation is, as things always happen in the past, that we will see them happen in the future, that potentially we would see an actual invasion on this date, just as he did back in 2019 when he originally invaded through that operation into Syria on October 9th of 19, which I showed you in that article. And so I believe there is a correlation somehow with my birthday here. And it doesn't mean anything to me. What I mean by that is that I'm insignificant here, okay? And I don't know why it's falling on my date of my birthday. It just seems to be happening that way, and it's happening multiple times. And I have family members that have dates that seem to also be happening at the same time, like this date of April 20th of 24, when we're going to see a signing of the treaty with the nations against Israel, and that's on Hitler's birthday. So I don't know why these dates are happening. I just think it's really interesting, at least in my world, and I have to explain this stuff to you guys because I think it's important. So if Erdogan were to invade in the next week or two, if he decides to leave NATO, would he then launch an attack into Syria by October 9th, and then besieging the walls of Jerusalem by the 22nd of 23 on the 10th of Av, or 10th of Tevet, as indicated here, which was the same day the Babylonians basically sieged them in 588, 589 BC in the past, when the first temple fell. It's an interesting timeline to look at this, and how these Jewish dates line up with very specific dates of destruction of Jewish calendars, and literally Jewish, the city of Jerusalem and different things like that, temples and things like that. So I think it's really extremely important. So for each of these dates, I have broken down it just the same way. And I wrote it down so you can see how I've added the 12th day of the 10th month based on this specific verse in the paradigm. But you have to start it on the very first day of that month in the Jewish calendar, which is this specific date. You add the 12 days to it because there's 12 additional days in that month, and that would lead you to a very specific date, and that would give you a Jewish calendar date also. And so when you push all this down through here, you'll start to realize that I now have adjusted them to my paradigms in a couple different places so you can actually get real dates and they're not guesstimations, because I don't do guesstimations well. This was bothering me that I had added 73 days to all this, and I warned you that I had done that because I had not had time to go through this process and to isolate these dates down with the Gregorian calendar to the Hebrew calendar dates so we knew what that conversion rate was. Now look at this. This is an interesting one, and I've talked about that governor of Antichrist that will be assassinated by potentially the son of Netanyahu based on the spelling that I found in the Bible that might be a Nostradamus type prophecy. It gives you his name, and what's really interesting, I knew this date here of July of 26 based on the paradigm, which ended up being September of 26 as you move into the Hebrew calendar. But then I realized on 3 Tishri of the date when this leader of Babylon actually died in the past, that it actually fell on Rosh Hashanah, but they actually assigned it to this date, okay, which is the assassination of that guy. So it was interesting that I knew that that was going to happen, at least I knew it was going to happen, but once you converted it from Gregorian to Hebrew, it actually fell in line with this date. So I actually added the 14th to the paradigm date here, because it happens on a very specific date when this occurs. And so I thought it was really important that I added that date, and I wanted you to be aware of that. So when you go to the paradigm, so when you move from December 22nd of 23 and you get to the other side of the chart where the other paradigm picks up again after you have that signing of the treaty on October 20th, which is Hitler's birthday, you would move into this area here, okay? And it clearly states that this on September 14th, so I knew that this was a September date, but I didn't know it was the 14th day. And then when I figured out it's the 3rd of Tishri, that this would be the day that son of Netanyahu, or this guy that looks really close to Nathaniel, however you want to say it in the Bible, kills this regional leader assigned by Antichrist. And I'll blow that up real quick so you can see that better. So on September 14th, the son of Netanyahu, however you want to go there, kills a regional leader assigned by Antichrist. You can find that in Jeremiah 41:1, 2 Kings 25 through 23 through 25 verses, and Jeremiah 41:1 through 18 verses, that this is a event that happened in the past that will occur in the future. And it's really interesting that he actually indicates it's by Antichrist. There's not been an Antichrist on the ground. And yes, a Hitler's an Antichrist, and a number of these people are Antichrist, but Antichrist hasn't been here yet. So it has to be a later day event because he specifically indicates it's Antichrist, okay? So I just want you to realize I've adjusted all these dates, and I've added them to 2 places on the paradigm charts on my website. So when you go to my website and you go down to the 5 PDFs, I've adjusted these 2 charts. The one that we've been looking at, which is the timetable, which is this chart here. And the second chart I've adjusted is the paradigm meld, because I took the parable, the fig tree chart, and the paradigm chart, and I put them together and they work perfectly. As I've explained in the past, I did not have to adjust those charts. So when you click on this chart, it brings over this overlay about the modern day kings and how all these kings reflect kings of the past. I've shown you where and how this all works. I've done a video about this just recently, but I've added that chart to here on the bottom because I had the parable of the fig tree going off here, and then when I add the paradigm indicated dates, timestamps, they fit directly into this without modifying it. So I wanted you to realize that, because I believe the paradigm, in my opinion, is right. Now, we're not going to know that until we see a few of these dates play out. I originally was looking at the December 22nd of 23 date because that is the actual sieging on Jerusalem that I've indicated. But now I'm looking at that potential October 9th date because we might actually see that invasion occur. And I'm not sure that that's going to happen, but it would make sense that it would happen on a date where Daniel is literally seeing a vision on a specific date in the Jewish calendar, and from that he is distressed due to that, and then Michael comes down, gives him that vision. He goes forward to fight against Persia, which is part of that Daniel 8 prophecy I keep talking about. Look, Daniel 8 is so important, and no one is talking about Daniel 8. They're all talking about Psalm 83, which is a part of this. That's really important. Psalm 83 is part of this. I haven't gone over that yet. I will try to do that. It goes over a lot of different things, but that is probably very prominent part of the Seals War due to the countries listed and different things like that. But then you also have to look at Daniel 8 and Ezekiel 38 and 39 because all three of those prophecies work together. Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38 and 39, and Daniel 8 through 12 basically, because you get into 10, and if you look at 8, or actually 7 through 12 in Daniel, you'll see Darius the Mede mentioned most of the time at the beginning of those chapters, and so you have to watch the Kurds because the Medes are the Kurds in the past history of time. And so the Kurds are going to play a massive role in what's coming forward. And both Iran and the Kurds have a judgment against them. Both those nations will basically be destroyed by God through Gog, which is his sword, which is Erdogan from Turkey. He sends a sword then against Israel with 10 nations, which is that Ezekiel 38-39 prophecy. But Daniel 8 has to happen first, because if you go to Ezekiel 38-39, what's the first country listed after the leader of, which is Gog of Meshech and Tubal, which is in Turkey, in the land of Magog, which is all in Turkey. So we know he comes from Turkey, and he's going to go against the Kurds, as it indicates in Daniel 8. Okay, that's first. That will build into an Ezekiel 38-39 prophecy, because then as Iran is absorbed, that's the first nation listed after Gog of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is indicated that he is from Turkey, and then it indicates something really important: Persia and 2 African nations called Put and Cush. Okay, so you need to understand that also Egypt will be involved in this, along with Saudi Arabia and other countries that are being affected. Jordan, Syria, Iraq, all these places are going to be affected by what's coming. So the question arises again, will Erdogan leave the EU soon? Real soon. That would then equate to basically leaving NATO, and that would then equate to an invasion against the Kurds or the Medes as we move forward in the next month, as we move into that potential October 9th date of 23, because we know, at least based on my analysis, in my opinion, we potentially would see a sieging of Jerusalem by December 22nd of 23 of this year. And look what's going on over there right now, guys. Turkey is ramping up the bombings against the Kurds, and Iran and Israel are getting ready to go down, and we've just watched Turkey try to normalize ties with Israel, which is part of Jeremiah and Isaiah, and all these guys' prophecies indicate that Israel would somewhat align with Turkey and Egypt to remove the Assyrian, but that turns out badly for Israel because the Babylonian would then remove the problem of Syria, or in this case, Iran, and then go against Israel, because in Nebuchadnezzar's time, the king of Judah quit paying him homage and actually paid it to the Egyptians. The Egyptians actually bailed on them, went back to their homeland, left the Jews and Israel to fend for themselves as the Babylonians came in. And Babylonians came in, looked at the king of Judah and said, I'm coming back, but I'm going to take care of these guys first. So they went down to Egypt, took care of Iran, came back, and then basically you saw a first temple destruction and the walls besieged by the Babylonian on the 10th of Tevet, which is basically the same thing that's going to happen in the future, possibly this year. We will see how that all turns out. God bless everybody. I wanted to explain that I've adjusted all these dates. I believe they are correct. I went through the last 24 hours really harshly to make sure that most of this information is correct. If you see a typo or a problem with that, please bring it to my attention, because I always want to make this stuff as proper as possible so you can understand it and it's not misleading. And I always want to show you where I find this information so that you can understand that I'm not just pulling these dates and things out of thin air. And so I'm going to be extremely specific and very detailed in how I break these things down. And hopefully you're understanding what I'm explaining to you. God bless you all. Things are going to break in the next few months. The markets are getting ready to collapse. I talked about those bond inversions. They've gone up and melded up again because Jay did pause, but he's talking about hawkish raises again. You're going to see that third and fourth quarter print of negative GDP. That's going to be another, which we're already in a recession, but it's going to be another indication of a technical recession. And you got the Fed coming out here telling you're going to land on soft pillows and it's going to be all gorgeous as the unemployment rate starts to spike. And we're watching everything from the auto industry basically getting ready to walk out, and we're moving into slow season. There's no way that we're going to grow here, which is what was required to get this economy up and running again. So if you haven't got your oil in your lamp, you better get it ready. God bless everybody. Get the open door. Find the open door. It's only Jesus that can get you to the end of the story. If you do not believe in Jesus and you only believe in God, then you're missing the most important, not the most important thing, but an extremely important thing to get to heaven, because God tells you it's only through his son Jesus that you can gain access to heaven. So you need to understand that. And you are going to be here for the next about 4 years, because we're working into the Feast of Trumpets now. And I'm talking about the Feast of Trumpets 27. On my calendar, we have 1,472 days to the Feast of Trumpets of October 2nd, which I believe, of 27, which I believe is the potential rapture of the people of Great Tribulation, that will then start the wrath of God up, or the 7 bowls right after that. Put your oil in your lamp, get right with God, pull the skeletons out, grumble, or get on your knees and let him know that you want to repent, and get rid of all those skeletons before you even have the ability to get to heaven. You'll be a whole lot better off when you have to go up there and answer for the things you've done here. And we're all sinners, so we have a lot of things to answer for. So God bless you. On my wife, I know I've been keeping everybody update. It's very dire. We are not doing well. She hasn't been eating for some time. And normally you don't get too far down the road if you don't eat for about a month. And so we're moving down that road pretty fast. She's just struggling in so many ways, and the cancer is just taking over everything, and the pain is pretty extreme. So I just want you to realize that we're holding our own right now. We have no answers for this, and she's going to be with our Savior soon. And all I can do is make her comfortable. God bless. Have a great night. Just to do a clarification in the video, I actually watched the video this time before I posted it, so I didn't make stupid comments. And I did make one that it wasn't really, it's a clarification that I wanted to do. So when I indicated that when the son of Netanyahu kills the governor that's assigned by Antichrist, in the Bible it actually indicates it's the Babylonian that assigns him. But when you go into it, and if you look at most people in the Bible that do these types of teachings, realize that the Babylonian at the end is Antichrist. So just realize that I didn't want to I didn't want to give you false information there. It indicates it's the Babylonian. I've indicated that the Babylonian is Antichrist as we move forward, because Gog will die, be placed in a grave, rise as a resurrected Gog into Antichrist. And so, yes, when you get to that stage and he puts in that last governor, which is the 12th leader of Israel, which would perish, and then Enoch says right after that, the story finishes, that this would be Antichrist that actually does that placing of that governor into position. So I didn't want to confuse you, and I don't want you to go, oh, he's making stuff up here. It is the Babylonian, and he is Antichrist, and in this case it will be Turkey, the leader of that nation that dies during, because Erdogan's the first seal. He's going to die on the 6th seal. We're going to have a resurrection event into the 5th and 6th trumpet, and then we're going to have an Antichrist figure come out. So there is a process to that, and once an Antichrist comes out and we see both leaders of Israel captured, he places that governor in place. The king of Babylon, which would be Antichrist at that moment, would then place that governor in place, and then the son of Netanyahu would kill him, which would end the season of the 12th leader. Enoch says right after that the story's over, and we know how that ends, by a rapture event. So just realize that's what I meant. I didn't want to mislead anybody there and say, well, it says Antichrist in the Bible. It does not say Antichrist. And I think I would have been called out on that, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. God bless. Have a great night.